Hi, everybody. I'm Jason Hubert, Director of Solutions Engineering at Akkio. And my background is I was a developer for about 25 years. And what I really did was write code that gave business users access to their data. The whole point of that was that they could make business decisions based on the data that they were storing. That's evolved quite a bit, and that's what we're here to talk about today.
And my name is Grant Sexton. I'm on the growth team here at Akkio. Prior to joining Akkio, I spent just a little under 3 years at Snowflake. Where first half of my time at Snowflake, I was on the sales side working with mid-market customers, and the back half was working with enterprise customers here in the Bay Area.
Nice. So Grant, we're all aware of the hype around ML and AI, that sort of thing. ChatGPT 4 is out, Bard is out, and everybody's saying, I've got to start using this, whether you're using it to cheat on your final exams or trying to make some business decisions on it. But at the end of the day, what you can't do is take that data I was just describing and throw it into ChatGPT 4 and get some useful business outcome out of it. It's just not possible. But that's kind of the hype around it. It's interesting because right now we're talking kind of the smallest we will about ML AI because it's kind of the beginning of the hockey stick. So going with that, kind of the hype and the trends, what sort of trends have you seen in the data industry with your background from Snowflake and how that applies to machine learning? What do you see coming?
The first trend that comes to mind is big data. And that's not a secret. It's been that way for the last 10 years and still all around big data with the exponential growth in not only data volume, but the variety of data that people are working with so many new data sources coming in and digital interactions, a lot of semi-structured data, unstructured data. I think with the topic today, Snowflake being revolutionary in the space, being able to process and store all of that data and then separate it out to only paying for when you're running compute and you're running queries. So I think one of the trends that comes to mind is big data. And as everyone is aware, I think in the last year or two, like you just said with the release of ChatGPT, AI and ML, a big buzzword. And the reason why I joined Akkio is so many customers just being more interested in asking questions around machine learning. I think the interesting part is that we're seeing more and more companies of all different sizes in all different industries realizing that they have the resources internally to start deploying machine learning models. So I think the misconception and really in the past, legacy machine learning projects were complicated to begin. You needed machine learning engineers, so it was expensive and just time consuming. So I think now more and more people are coming to the forefront and adopting machine learning.
Right. And I don't think that's changed, that you still have these use cases where you need these data scientists and machine learning engineers, as you put it. I still think that exists. I don't think that's going to change at all. Nobody's job is at risk. The thing is, now you have the tools that make some of these other use cases that don't justify using those individuals accessible to those data analysts. So you can take a data analyst who understands the data and then knows what business outcome, and they can use something like Akkio to get the business outcome or the prediction that they need. So the tools is really what's changing here, not only from the data storage and the data warehousing side, but also from enabling a lot of different users from a variety of backgrounds to use or leverage machine learning.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I think we both just mentioned how analysts can use machine learning for certain models. So
Right.
A question for you is, now that they can start building some of those predictive models, what skills do they need and how can they start using their Snowflake data if they are a Snowflake customer?
Yeah, great. So first of all, they don't need to know any programming languages. Number one, that's gone. Again, we're talking about for some of these use cases that are business specific and they have industry knowledge about the outcome that they want. So what skills that they actually need? They need to know the data. They need to know what each column means in their data set. They need to have access to that data. Of course, they need to know where it resides, that sort of thing. But Snowflake makes that rather simple. And the reason they need to know the data is Akkio is going to provide insights. Akkio is going to give you the model. You don't have to write any code, but you have to understand if that model is useful. You have to understand if the outcome, the prediction that's being made is meaningful. If you take a product that costs $10 and I show you a 15-cent variance, that might be acceptable to you. If the product is $50 and it's a $15 variance, that sounds unacceptable to me. But that's something that the business analyst needs to understand, is what that precision or that outcome, that decision that we're suggesting, what that means to the business and put it in that context. So skills that they need to have is understand the business, understand the data, and then we can put it together with the tools that we have in Akkio.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, we internally say Excel jockeys or data competent business users. And I think back to, as I mentioned, my first year and a half or so at Snowflake was spent working with earlier stage companies pretty early on in their data journey. And Snowflake might have been their first data warehouse or they're early on in that journey with Snowflake. I look back and I wish I could have introduced this woman I was working with. She was a data analyst, but she could have been 7 more titles on top of data analyst. When I was starting to understand her use cases and understanding how she was using Snowflake and storing that data, Akkio would have been a perfect fit for her, and honestly a great way to up-level your career, where she can go to, let's say, the CEO or her boss in that mid-market size SMB company and start to give predictive analytics and like pretty complicated business decisions that might not be, they're not done today. So for her to be able to leverage something like Akkio, I think also a great way to start to up-level your career.
Yeah, totally agree. That's kind of the next step, is take those business analysts, give them the tools that they need to do what they're trying to accomplish. Now, it's exciting. We want to do it. It's great to get that kind of boost in your resume sort of thing, but also it's superbly rewarding. There's no question.
So you've been talking about your experience, and as we introduced ourselves, you have a background in some data science. For those that are listening today that maybe haven't gone through a legacy machine learning project, can you just shed some light on that as to how much time it took and kind of what goes into it?
Yeah. Let's start from the beginning. So number one, months. There's no exaggeration there at all. It's months that it takes. So let's say you're the business user, I'm the data scientist. You come to me and say, I have the data and we want to do this business outcome. It's valid, we're thumbs up, and we think we can do it. What it starts with first is I get access to the data. So that's usually the first hurdle, and that still in some ways remains, right? And data scientists spend 60 to 80% of the time wrangling data or munging data, depending on how you want to look at it. What we're doing in that time is we're looking at holes in the data, missing data, formatting issues, dates that are entered wrong, just stuff that's been put in wrong or isn't put in a standardized way. So we're getting it into what we would call a data table, or a format that can be used in data science. That's time that you're kind of sitting there doing your job and wondering what the heck is going on. Now I've given you a project plan, I've prepared you for this, so you know what's happening. That's weeks of time to do that without exaggeration. 60 to 80% of my time was spent doing that. Once the data is the way I want it, I'll do some initial exploratory data analysis. And that means I'm going to write some Python, some R, some Java code, depending on where I was at in my career, to look at the data and say, well, here's what I can see in it. And that output is going to be some sort of programmatic output. Now I can format it in a table, but it's going to be via command line. It's going to be Python output or Java output, something that you're not generally familiar with looking at, the little we know each other. It's certainly not going to be graphical. It's not going to be nice charts and graphs, nothing like that. It's going to be some raw data. I'll come back to you with that and say, here's what we got. Here's what we're working with. And you'll understand a majority of that. And then I'll go back and start to build a model because we've agreed on the outcome. So at this point, it's probably 6 to 8 weeks in that we're talking now, since you've asked for this initially. From there, I'll build a model. I'll come back and say, well, here's a prediction based on what you told me. Say, wow, it's good, but I think we could tweak this. I'll go back a couple weeks later. Here's another model, right? Each time I'm running these models, I'm running them on my laptop. They take hours to run in some cases. I can also run them in AWS or some sort of cloud service. They still take a lot of time. You're sitting there wondering what's happening. Of course, we're communicating, but there's not a lot you can see until it's done. Once the model's done, we agree. It's been months at this point. No exaggeration, a number of months. We still need to get you access to that model. It's running on my laptop. At that point, we hand it off. As a data scientist, you generally won't have the ability to create an API or something like that. So you hand it off to a set of developers, and they'll put it in the cloud, and they'll give you an API, or they'll integrate it with whatever you want to integrate to make those predictions. Maybe they'll give you a web form that you can interact with it. That takes an amount of time because we got to schedule time with them. They've got to write some code and come back to you. So all of that takes, no kidding, we just generally say about 6 months. It could be less, could be more, but that's the general gist of it. To contrast that with what we do today is you would come to me, we'd both look at my laptop, probably over Zoom because we don't live in the same location, and we'd upload your data. We'd probably go to Snowflake, enter your credentials and say, well, what are we looking at here? Choose the table that we're looking at, and we pull that data into Akkio. That takes minutes in this case. Then Akkio's automatically going to do that exploratory data analysis. You're going to see a chart or graph above every single one of your columns, and you can click on that column and show a correlation to other columns. That's that part I said would have taken me probably about 6 to 8 weeks at this point. We can also do that data cleaning step with a click of a button. You can do that without me. I'm just going to show you how to do it one time. Once that's done, then you can start to do things like creating new columns. You can delete columns. You can remove columns. You can do some things like that with Chat Data Prep. If you want to just see some insights and do some of that charting and graphing I was saying that I was going to do in a Python code, you can do that with Chat Explorer and just say, hey, chart the correlation between these two fields, and it'll just do it for you, things like that. So we'll do that together, and at this point, it's been maybe 10 minutes together. From there, I'm going to go on the left side and hit plus, and we're going to predict. We're going to choose what we're trying to predict, whatever that was for our use case, we're going to predict. Now, we're probably not in 10 minutes going to get a production ready model, but we'll get to a point where you're going to have a smile on your face. You say, okay, this looks good. You're going to want to use it. I'm going to ask you to hold off because I want to spend a little bit more time making sure that I'm comfortable. Akkio still exposes R scores and R SE, stuff like that I want to look at to make sure I'm comfortable before you start using this for actual business decisions. But in the meantime, you can still play with the data through Chat explore a little bit, and then I can deploy a web form for you to actually start making some predictions that I'll caution you to not use in production until it's ready. But you can still start to use it. And this is about 15 minutes that we've been looking over my shoulder at my laptop. So that's the difference. 6 months, 15 to 30 minutes, I'll say, is kind of the difference between them now.
To interrupt you, that's just, I was laughing at that because the fact that we've been working with customers, and sure, it won't take you 5 minutes to actually, build that model, but it'll take you a week. And we've worked with, several customers now that have built that together over a number of days or a week. So in terms of time savings, it's,
in production. I mean, it's crazy. So let's go back to Snowflake for a little bit. Your experience with Snowflake, we pull data in from a variety of sources, Snowflake being one of the biggest data warehouse platforms doing ETL, ELT process, that sort of thing. A lot of users that are using the platform, very familiar with the data. They understand it really well. So how do you think those users that are Snowflake users, whether they're just a simple user of Snowflake, they know the data is there, or maybe they're a power user of Snowflake, can take advantage of this ML AI revolution?
Yeah, so first thing to point out, and I want to mention, we are a Snowflake partner. So Akkio is a partner of Snowflake, which makes it very easy for that integration. So in terms of different data analysts, let's say accessing that Snowflake data, they can run predictive analytics without complex data transfers or any sort of like third-party integrations. It's a very seamless integration where you can deploy directly back to Snowflake. So pause there. I think the second piece is the fact that what we just mentioned in kind of the topic of the day being around data analysts and different users, the reality is if you have Snowflake in place, if your organization is using Snowflake, you likely have different technical users within Snowflake.
Sure.
So if you might be that data analyst, like you just said, who doesn't have Python experience, doesn't know how to do complex code, or wouldn't consider themselves a data scientist, we have templates that you can use and get started and start to toy around with Akkio and sign up online for a trial. So I think it's a very, very seamless, easy integration, and makes it pretty easy for analysts to just go in and poke around.
All right, Grant. It's been a pleasure discussing the trends that we're seeing. Like I said before, this is kind of the beginning of it, right? This is a hockey stick. We're talking a lot about ML AI, but this is really just the beginning. Akkio's been around for a little while, but the industry's just kind of beginning and starting out. ChatGPT is really popular. I think a lot of business users are just realizing they need to leverage ML AI in their business to make those business decisions, and Akkio makes that possible.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, Jason. Thanks for the chat today, and excited as well to see the future of machine learning and AI. Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you next time.